The Kahler Family Case. Can this crime be justified by a nervous disorder? In 1995, Kansas passed a law stating that an offender who committed a premeditated crime could not blame his actions on a mental disorder that made him unable to distinguish right from wrong. This law was passed because almost every criminal, when brought to trial, tried to avoid punishment by claiming that he was not in control of his actions or did not realize the consequences because of a mental disorder. The head of the once happy and large Kahler family tried to use insanity as a defense to avoid responsibility for the atrocities he committed. However, he was found sane. Psychologists believe that his actions were motivated by jealousy, rage, and a desire for revenge against the ex-wife who left him and the daughters who supported their mother. Unfortunately, such crimes motivated by jealousy and a pathological desire for revenge are a common worldwide phenomenon. According to statistics, these motives account for 1 in 8 crimes committed. Excessive suspicion, insecurity, and obsessive need to control a partner can turn a person into a real beast who does not spare even his own children. The story of the Kahler family. James Kraig Kahler was born in 1963 in Weatherford, Texas. His future wife, Karen Kahler, née White, was born in the same city in 1965. They met in the early 1980s as students at a Texas university. Kraig was graduating in engineering, and Karen was a freshman in the humanities department. They quickly found common ground and soon began a romantic relationship. They were young, in love, and seemed like the perfect couple. Kraig was a top student known for his determination and talent in engineering. In the late 1980s, after graduation, they had a modest wedding attended only by close friends and family. Their first child, Emily, was born in 1991, followed by Lauren in 1993. They lived in a cozy house in Weatherford and were quite well off by local standards. In 1999, when Karen was pregnant with her third child, Kraig received a lucrative job offer at a large utility company in Weatherford. His promotion coincided with the birth of their son, Sean, whom he adored. With a higher income, Kraig bought a spacious house in the city's most prestigious neighborhood and a reliable family car. Karen stayed at home, and Kraig became the primary breadwinner. Outwardly, the family seemed perfect. The daughters, Emily and Lauren, were talented in sports and music, often participating in vocal competitions and local events. Emily excelled in school and went to a prestigious pharmacy college, while Lauren, an excellent student, dreamed of attending a conservatory to pursue a career in music. Sean was an outgoing, kind, and inquisitive boy, interested in numismatics and aspiring to become an archaeologist. He was very close to his parents and sisters. Kraig provided for his family. Karen made the home comfortable, raised the children, and baked tasty treats. They were active in the community, striving to improve their neighborhood. They also raised 3 wonderful and talented children. However, behind the facade of perfection, there were many problems that family members kept hidden. In 2007, Karen admitted to her younger sister Linda that she was on the verge of a nervous breakdown. She complained that Kraig had been controlling and monitoring her for years, and that this control was increasing. Kraig demanded a full accounting of all expenditures, not just major purchases, but everyday household expenses as well. Karen provided him with supermarket receipts, bank transaction data, and reported her whereabouts every day while he was at work. The entire Kahler family lived on a strict schedule set by Kraig. When he returned from work, his wife and children had to be home to meet him. They went to bed, woke up, and ate at certain times, and even intimacy between the couple was scheduled. Over time, Kraig's obsession with control intensified. He became increasingly demanding and selfish, and Karen's actions were scheduled down to the hour. Karen felt enslaved. She had no free time, only duties and responsibilities. She tried to fulfill all of her husband's demands, hoping that he would loosen his control and they could get back to their old life, but Kraig seemed to enjoy his control and was unwilling to change. Linda was deeply disturbed by her sister's revelations. She, like everyone else, had seen Kraig as the perfect husband, father, and family man, and it turned out he was a domestic tyrant. However, Karen did not want to destroy her family. Besides, she and her children were financially dependent on Kraig. Therefore, she decided to find a job that would provide her with a stable income. Karen's new hobby. Karen, despite her advanced age and 3 children, was in great physical shape. She always adhered to the principles of good nutrition, periodically followed diets, took care of herself, and went jogging every day. Secretly from her husband, she enrolled in a local fitness club where she started working out for several hours every day. It was her way of blowing off steam, distracting herself and getting her thoughts in order. She attended the gym while Kraig was at work and didn't notice her working out. Soon the management of the sports club noticed the attractive, fit, and diligent woman. Karen was offered to try herself as a fitness instructor with a probationary period and the possibility of an official labor contract. The former housewife could not have dreamed of such an opportunity because now she will be able to continue doing what she loves and even receive a decent remuneration for it. Eventually, Kraig found out that his wife was going to the gym. Karen expected a scandal and that her husband would forbid her to go, but surprisingly, he reacted calmly. He even seemed pleased that his wife had found something to do and was now earning her own money. His only conditions were that she had to be home when he arrived, cook meals, and not disrupt their planned intimate life. Karen found these conditions acceptable because now she had the freedom of action and the ability to provide for her own needs without having to justify to her husband every dime she spent. Unexpected romance and a love triangle. Soon there was a new instructor at the fitness club named Sonny Rice. Karen and Sonny quickly hit it off and became friends. For Karen, who had been a stay-at-home mom for many years and was unable to socialize with people outside the family, Sonny became a trusted confidant. The women spent time together at work every day, sometimes going for walks, drinking coffee, and having heart-to-heart talks. It didn't take long for their friendship to grow into something more. Naturally, they hid their feelings and relationship from everyone, but in time, Karen decided that she had to confess everything to her husband. She spent months preparing for this conversation, trying to find the right words, not knowing how to start and what the consequences might be. Eventually, she opened up to Kraig. Although Kraig was quite puzzled by his wife's revelation, he reacted rather calmly and did not make a scene. However, the next day, Kraig stated that he agreed to his wife's relationship with Sonny, but on the condition that he could join them. Karen was shocked by her husband's proposal and didn't know how to react to it. Nevertheless, Kraig took the initiative and began courting Sonny, sending her flowers and small gifts. He seemed to see this as an opportunity to brighten his intimate life and add passion and new sensations to his marriage to Karen. At first, the women agreed to his proposal, but soon realized that for Kraig it was a game of dominance. Their peculiar love triangle didn't last long, and Kraig was made to realize that he was not welcome in their relationship. Feeling insulted, Kraig demanded that Karen end the affair immediately, but she continued to date Sonny, genuinely in love. After nearly 2 decades of marriage, it seemed that Karen was ready to leave her husband for a new relationship. A move to another state and secret meetings. After months of scandals, confrontations, and agonizing deliberation, Kraig decided that the best solution to save his family would be to move to another state. He began looking for a new job, sending out resumes, and soon landed a position as a water director for a large company in Columbia, Missouri, a city neighboring Kansas. Kraig believed that his wife's move to another state would end her affair with Sonny and their family life would return to normal. The move in the summer of 2008 proved difficult for the family, as the children had to change schools, make new friends, and adjust to life in a new city. Although the family was already well off, Kraig's salary in his new position was nearly double what he earned in Weatherford. However, with more responsibilities and more hours on the job, Kraig naively thought he had cut Sonny out of his wife's life for good, but he was wrong. Karen and Sonny continued to communicate regularly, exchanging calls and texts and meeting in secret. They would drive to meet halfway and spend a couple hours in a roadside hotel before returning home. By then, Karen knew her marriage was doomed. She no longer loved her husband, and divorce was only a matter of time. These secret trysts continued until December 2008. On that New Year's Eve, the Kahler family returned to their hometown to visit family and friends. Sonny was also present at this party. Karen and Sonny behaved low-key at first, simply exchanging greetings. However, as the party progressed and under the influence of alcohol, they seemed to forget about social norms. The lovers were inseparable, holding hands, exchanging longing glances, and some guests even caught them kissing. Kraig wasn't just angry, he was furious. Karen had insulted and humiliated him in front of dozens of former roommates, friends, and co-workers, making her affair public. Kraig made a scene at the party, verbally attacking his wife and Sonny. An enraged Kraig forcibly dragged Karen away from the party. On the way home, he lost control of himself. He grabbed her by the shoulders and shook her with such force that her dress ripped. He then slapped her, causing her to stumble and fall, hitting her head hard. Divorce and painful harassment. After returning home, the conflict did not subside, and a few days later, Karen told Kraig that she was leaving him. She initiated divorce proceedings and demanded custody of the children. At first, Kraig tried to apologize, begging to keep the family for the sake of the children and offering to give their marriage another chance. However, Karen was adamant and obtained a divorce. Kraig then began calling their mutual friends and relatives, asking them to talk to Karen and convince her not to break up the family and stay with him. Despite his best efforts, she firmly told him that she was leaving for Sonny and was never truly happy in their marriage. In the early spring of 2009, while they were still living under the same roof, another argument broke out, and Kraig resorted to physical violence for the first time since that New Year's Eve party. Karen reported him to the police and he was arrested. However, at the station, he claimed that his wife was hysterical and he only held her tightly to calm her down, which caused the bruises on her arms. After this incident, Karen, without waiting for an official divorce, took the children and moved out. For Kraig, it was a serious blow, but even more he was angry when he learned that his daughters sided with their mother, saying that for the first time in a long time saw her happy. He saw this as a betrayal and refused to communicate with Emily and Lauren, only calling Sean and taking him with him on weekends, while blatantly ignoring his daughters. Meanwhile, despite the ongoing divorce proceedings, Kraig still hoped that his wife would change her mind and come back to him. He was jealous, tried to control her, and followed her everywhere. He watched her house, followed her around town in a rental car trying to remain undetected, and even tried to set up a hidden camera in her house when no one was there. Naturally, all of this took time and effort, so Kraig had to sacrifice work. First, he took a vacation, then he claimed that he was sick, and in the end he just started skipping work without explanation. This reckless behavior led to his termination. After losing his job and source of income, Kraig was forced to move into his parents' house because he couldn't afford his own. Now, with plenty of free time, he was able to stalk his ex-wife all day long, leading her to take his ex-husband to court to stop him from approaching her. Horrible Thanksgiving. In November 2009, just before Thanksgiving, Karen took her children to visit her 89-year-old grandmother, Dorothy White, in the small town of Burlingame, Kansas, to spend the vacations. On the evening of November 29th, the Burlingame Police Department received an alarm call about a suspicious van and the sound of gunshots. Dorothy's neighbors reported seeing a small truck pull up to the elderly woman's home, a man get out of it and enter the house. They then allegedly heard screams and gunshots, but are not sure. The man then left the house, got back into the truck, and drove away quickly. Neighbors did not attempt to apprehend him, fearing he was armed. When police pulled up to the house, they were met by a terrified 10-year-old boy calling for help. It was Sean Kahler, who couldn't explain what had happened, but it was clear that a terrifying scene awaited the police inside. Near the front door, they found the 89-year-old homeowner lying in a pool of blood and surprisingly alive despite 2 gunshot wounds. In the kitchen, police found the lifeless body of 44-year-old Karen. She had been shot in the chest and then killed by a close-range gunshot to the head. Her ex-husband had left her with no chance of survival. The body of her oldest daughter, 18-year-old Emily, lay between a wall and a couch. She had apparently tried to hide from her enraged father, but he caught up with her and took her life with 2 point-blank shots. Her younger sister, Lauren, lay in a pool of blood in a second-floor bedroom. She was still alive, begging faintly to save her life and repeatedly stating that her father had done it. The elderly woman and Lauren were immediately rushed to the intensive care unit of a nearby hospital. Despite the doctor's best efforts, their lives could not be saved. Lauren died on the morning of December 1st from massive blood loss and damage to her internal organs, and her great-grandmother died a few hours later that day. The only surviving witness. Sean was in a state of shock. Psychologists worked with him, but he needed a thorough interrogation as the only living witness to the tragic events at his great-grandmother's house. He said that evening his mother was in the kitchen preparing dinner, and he approached her to ask for his favorite pies. Suddenly, the back door of the house swung open and their father entered the house with a shotgun in his hands. Without saying a word, the man pointed the barrel at his ex-wife and shot her, then moved closer and fired again. For the first few seconds, Sean froze in horror. Then his father turned to him, but didn't aim, just silently and intently stared at him. Sean realized he had to run, so he jumped out the open back door. The boy ran toward the main entrance, hoping to alert his grandmother and sisters and call for help. However, as he reached the threshold, he heard several more gunshots. Fearing to enter the house, he hid in a small outbuilding. He heard several more shots and waited in terror for his father to come after him. Where is Mr. Kahler? Kraig was immediately put on the wanted list, warning that he was armed and extremely dangerous. Meanwhile, police received several reports of a speeding truck, which helped them quickly determine the direction the gunman was traveling. At one point, the man abandoned his vehicle in a wooded area and began walking down a deserted road. Law enforcement quickly caught up with him and apprehended him the next morning. He had left the rifle and ammunition in the back seat, with prescription medication for depression and anxiety disorders lying next to the driver's seat. Mr. Kahler did not resist arrest. He did not seem to care anymore. He looked confused and even frightened, and honestly admitted that he was armed with a gun and a hunting knife, but did not intend to use them. He also admitted that he had done something terrible that he believed the police already knew about. At first, when he was taken to the police station, Kraig fully admitted his guilt and poured his heart out to the investigating officer. He told how his wife had cheated on him with Sonny, how they had humiliated him in front of his friends at a New Year's Eve party, how his attempts to save his marriage had cost him his job, and what was left of his self-respect. The man cried, said he did not know how he had decided to take such a step, and complained that everyone, including his daughters, had betrayed him. Trial and fair sentence. Kraig's trial began in December 2010. The defendant, who was advised by his lawyer Thomas Heaney, recanted his initial confession, blaming his actions on mental illness and insanity. It was his only option to avoid the death penalty for the murder of 4 people. Heaney tried to convince the court that his client was in a difficult psycho-emotional state after his wife left him for a lover. His children sided with their mother. He lost his job and was forced to move back into his parents' home. All of these factors contributed to the breakdown, the lawyer said, and Mr. Kahler committed the crime while insane, not realizing what he was doing. Prior to 1995, there was indeed a law that allowed criminals to get leniency by pleading insanity. However, in Kansas, where the crime was committed and the trial took place, that law was repealed. Furthermore, the prosecution found no evidence of insanity, or affective state in Kraig's actions, only cold calculation. He purchased guns and ammunition in advance, went to Dorothy White's house, knowing that his entire family was there. He shot each victim twice, leaving no chance of survival. However, he deliberately spared his son, Sean, allowing him to escape. In August 2011, the man was found guilty on all counts and sentenced to death. Sean, who was 12 years old at the time, testified at the final hearing. He said that he did not wish his father dead, as he was the only close relative left. Despite numerous appeals by Kraig and his attorneys, the verdict remained unchanged. As of today, Mr. Kahler is still in prison and continues to fight to have the case reviewed and the death sentence overturned. As for Sean, after the death of his mother and sisters, he was officially taken into custody by his maternal grandmother. He is now an adult, has finished school, received an education, and has decided to stay and work in his home state. On the morning of August 22, 2016, residents of the small Spanish town of Pobra do Caraminal, rushing to work, found flyers posted everywhere. Volunteers had tirelessly pasted them on every building. The pictures on the flyers showed a young 18-year-old Diana Maria Kerr Lopez Pinel. The young girl was of a very frail build at about 6 feet tall. Her black hair, brown eyes, and delicate appearance made her irresistible. The evening before she disappeared, she was wearing pink shorts, a t-shirt, a white sweatshirt, and black sneakers. The description said the girl left home the night before and suddenly disappeared. Since last night, her family, along with volunteers and special services, have been desperately and tirelessly searching for the missing girl in every possible way. They have scoured every street and explored every corner, hoping to find some trace and bring Diana home. Juan Carlos, Diana's father, was in Madrid, but wasted no time in contacting the police to trace the calls from his daughter's phone and find out the last location of her phone. He also contacted the local newspaper and urged residents to help with the search. If you have any information, even the smallest, contact the police. The police need your help, Diana's father reported. Diana's mother, on the verge of depression, pleaded with the public. "We are doing everything we can to find Diana, but we still haven't gotten any answers. If you have any information, please help us. We are in a situation where even the slightest rumor can become important and help us find our daughter." Diana Maria Kerr Lopez Pinel was born on August 12, 1998, in Madrid. She was the daughter of Diana Cristina Lopez Pinel Pinarejo and Juan Carlo Kerr, and had a sister named Valeria. The family was quite wealthy and closely related. However, in 2013, Diana's parents divorced, which greatly affected the sisters. They faced depression, often conflicted over the attention of their mother, who took most of the care of them. Despite this, the father saw his daughters regularly. During vacations, Diana and her mother and sister often visited the small town of Pobra do Caraminal on the coast, with a population of about 10,000. In the summer of 2016, Diana's family spent their vacations as usual in the cozy town of Pobra do Caraminal. Every summer, they returned here to enjoy the silence and beauty of the place. Sunday, August 21st, promised to be just like all the other days. In the evening, around 10 o'clock, Diana went up to her mother and told her that she was going to go to Valle Inclán Park to meet her friends and have fun in honor of the Feast of the Virgin Carmen. Valle Inclán Park was not far from the cottage where the family was staying, and was a place where Diana often walked. Her mother, seeing nothing strange in it, allowed her to go there again. The girl spent that evening merrily among her friends. 4 hours later, Diana said goodbye to her friends and was about to return home, not realizing that this would be their last goodbye. On the way, she met her acquaintance Paseo de Ariel, not far from the very pizzeria where Diana often spent time. It was about 2:30 in the morning when they said goodbye. Paseo de Ariel was the last person to see Diana on that dark night. The morning of August 22nd, 2016 turned into a nightmare for Diana's mother, Maria Kerr Lopez Pinel. At 8:30 in the morning, she realized that something was wrong with her daughter. The girl hadn't come home from the party. Her cell phone was off or out of range, and this caused alarm. The mother decided not to wait and immediately called the police, reporting her daughter missing. Based on the information from the mother, it could be concluded that Diane did not have any serious emotional or mental health issues, despite a troubled childhood due to her parents' divorce. Her prolonged absence was very strange and raised serious concerns. police began to unravel the tangle of incomprehensible events surrounding the disappearance of Diana Maria Kerr Lopez Pinal, and investigators had to find out what happened when Diana disappeared without a trace. It turned out that Diana's last messages were sent to a friend of hers from Madrid via WhatsApp. In them, she wrote about a certain stranger who was stalking her and shouting strange phrases, scaring the girl. These messages were Diana's last contact with the outside world, as she no longer responded to the messages, although they were read. The next day, the police began to retrace the route Diana had to take to get home. It was there, along the road, that they found a black hairband that looked very much like the one Diana had been wearing that night. It was the only thing that was found at the scene of the disappearance. But other than that, investigators had no other evidence. Diana's friends were unable to provide any useful information, and there were no CCTV cameras on the last stretch of Diana's journey. The street was poorly lit and sparsely populated, with only a few garages and a dilapidated Boomerang nightclub along the road. Some witnesses claimed to have seen Diana get out of a car with 3 guys in it. Allegedly, she moved to another car, which took her away from the port, but these testimonies were not confirmed. Investigators considered 2 main versions of what happened. The first one suggested that Diana was kidnapped by someone she might have known. The second version linked the disappearance to a possible attack by a maniac. Diana's mother even suggested a third version, that her daughter could have been taken away on a boat. Diana's friend and ex-boyfriend reported that she met a guy from Morocco, and together they bought hashish. But this information only complicated the picture of the disappearance. An important point was the information in the media about the discovery of the clothes that Diana wore that evening. However, Diana's mother denied this information, claiming that no clothes were found. In addition, her credit card and identification were left in the house. Diana could not just run away, leaving all her belongings and documents behind. This fact and other circumstances confirmed that the girl's disappearance was not of her own free will. Nevertheless, the case still remained mysterious and could not be solved. Shortly after Diana's disappearance, the press reported on the quarrel that broke out between Diana and her mother just a few days before the tragic event. The media claimed that Diana had suffered a nervous breakdown that required medical attention, and that her younger sister, Valeria, had also been hospitalized with the same symptoms. To prevent further litigation and conflict, custody rights to the younger sister were transferred to the father on Thursday, September 1st. This was a preventative measure to avert further strife in the local community, which was already gripped by an unsettling atmosphere over Diana's disappearance. The father and his daughter left town, and rumors began to spread that the family was hiding something important. According to Diana's friends, running away from home was commonplace for the sisters, especially for her younger sister, Valeria, who was only 16 years old. Relationships in the family were complicated, and quarrels between mother and daughters were not uncommon. This information became available to the public, and the question immediately arose, why was the mother so anxious when Diana did not return home, if the girl had previously often left home? On Wednesday, August 31st, Diana's parents did not show up for a scheduled press interview where they were scheduled to give details of the investigation. The family lawyer explained that the parents were emotionally crushed at the thought that they might never see their daughter again. The newspaper El Mundo published an article on September 11 that shed light on other aspects of the family's life. It said that the mother's words that Diana did not have mental problems were contradicted by information about her April disappearance. At the time, Diane left home for 3 days and her mother did not contact police. The girl would turn off her phone to anger her mother and said she no longer wanted to live with her. Letters written by Diana and Valeria to each other also appeared in the press. From them, it became clear that both sisters were going through serious emotional problems. Valeria has even been hospitalized several times over the past year, once having to have her stomach pumped due to an overdose of prescription drugs.
In the absence of progress in the investigation into Diana's disappearance, prosecutors have launched an investigation into the abuse of the Lopez-Pinel family's youngest daughter, Valeria. The investigation into Diana Kerr's disappearance continued to be intense and progressed at full speed. Forensic experts seized a number of items belonging to the girl, including a toothbrush, a comb, a personal computer, her diary, and some prescription drugs. These items were subjected to a thorough analysis. Investigators then began questioning Diana's acquaintances, including a young Moroccan man with whom Diana had a brief affair. All of these measures failed to yield the desired results, and further police searches remained unsuccessful. The police conducted extensive searches in the mountains, forests, rivers, and lakes near the site of the disappearance. However, it appears that Diana disappeared around 3 a.m., and the last signal from her phone was found in the Tarragona area, 13 miles from where the family was staying. 72 days after her disappearance, Diana Kerr's case remained a mystery. None of the investigators' leads have yet been confirmed. In addition to a hairband, police found a cell phone that matched the description of Diana's phone. Her father confirmed that it was his daughter's cell phone. 2 months after her disappearance, Diana's Facebook profile was suddenly activated. Friends and relatives immediately notified the police and provided screenshots. It turned out that the Remind Password function had been used to avoid entering profile login details. This left 2 theories. Either Diana had forgotten her password, or the attacker was trying to gain access to her profile. Diana's phone was a key element in the case, however, it was never able to shed any light on the mysterious disappearance. On November 10, 2016, the driver of the very car in which Diana was allegedly last seen was finally identified. The man had previously been detained on charges of human trafficking. Information about his involvement in Diana's disappearance was kept secret for a long time so as not to disrupt the investigation. His wife claimed that he was with her that night, which excluded him from the list of suspects. However, on December 25, 2017, an incident occurred that became a key point in the investigation. One of the girls was attacked by a man, demanding her phone and threatening her with a weapon. The terrified victim screamed, and a couple passing by came to her aid. They rescued the girl from the thug who tried to pull her into a car. The shaken victim immediately contacted police, providing a description of the perpetrator and his license plate number. The next morning, police arrested 41-year-old Jose Enrique Abingay, who was also known as El Chico. The man already had a criminal past. The police immediately found out Jose Enrique turned out to be the same driver detained in 2016 on suspicion of kidnapping Diana Kerr. However, he was then released because they believed the alibi provided by his wife. The police again questioned the suspect and his wife. As a result of the interrogation, the wife admitted that she had previously lied, and in fact, on the night of Diana's disappearance, her husband was out of the house and did not return until 4 a.m.
Jose Enrique was eventually forced to admit that he accidentally hit Diana on the road and then was afraid to go to the police. That is why he decided to dispose of the body. However, he later changed his version of events, confessing to kidnapping and killing Diana. According to him, he came to the seashore to pick up gasoline from abandoned cars, and it was there that he saw Diana. Jose kidnapped her, tried to force her to have sexual intercourse, and then strangled her. This shocking truth brought new details to the case and confirmed that Diana Kerr's disappearance was the result of a gruesome crime. The disappearance of Diana Kerr Lopez Pinel was a long and harrowing experience for her family and everyone who followed the case. Nearly 500 days of investigation and constant media speculation only added to the pain of her loved ones. The accusations directed at Diana's parents only served to confuse and hinder the investigation. Despite this, Through persistent investigation and the testimony of a second victim, investigators were able to gather the necessary evidence and find the perpetrator. Diana will be remembered by her loved ones as a bright and vivacious young woman who was unlucky enough to find herself in the path of a violent criminal. Her story serves as a reminder of how important it is to unite in the difficult moments of fighting crime to end impunity and ensure the safety of all citizens. Unfortunately, the perpetrator did not admit for a long time where he hid Diana's body, but later, family and friends managed to say goodbye to Diana and give her a proper burial. The body was found in the well of an abandoned warehouse. In January 2018, Jose was sentenced to life in prison with the possibility of parole after serving 35 years.
A complex crime. The incident that occurred in late summer 2016 at Spring Creek Park sparked a wave of public outrage. How many similar tragedies must happen before New York City authorities listen to the citizens' pleas? Local residents had repeatedly alerted authorities about the presence of unsettling individuals in the park. Some of them would gather in groups while others wandered alone. Either way, their appearance evoked a sense of danger. Regrettably, it took a crime for the city administration to finally take action and address this issue. Additionally, the event led to numerous discussions and topics about the safety of female runners, particularly those who exercise alone. According to a survey, 54% of women feel anxious when they go out, fearing they might be subjected to verbal harassment or physical attacks. The story of Karina Vetrano is both horrifying and baffling, firstly because nothing seemed amiss on the day of the fateful event. The attack on the woman occurred in broad daylight, in a fairly populated area. Secondly, her death has a mystical aspect to it. And thirdly, the investigation of the case, as well as the sentencing of the perpetrator, raised many questions. On Tuesday, August 2nd, 2016, Karina arranged to meet her father after work. They wanted to spend time together. Since Miss Vetrano had moved, family gatherings had become rare because everyone was busy with their own things. In addition, the young woman was combining two jobs. Philip picked up his daughter and took her to his home. There, the family shared their impressions of the past week. When Karina was about to go home, she asked her father if he wanted to go jogging with her, as they often did, covering several miles together. Her father replied that he couldn't this time. "You see, my back hurts so badly that nothing helps. Maybe a new prescription is needed. Or maybe it's the change in the weather," Mr. Vetrano explained. "Maybe I should call you a cab." The weather was beautiful, the heat had abated, and there was a fresh smell in the air. Therefore, Karina declined the offer. Besides, she was training for the upcoming marathon. The young woman had recently broken up with her boyfriend and wanted to distract herself. A jog would clearly do her good. That evening was the last time the parents saw their youngest daughter. At 5:45 p.m., she left the house for a jog. Her first stop was Spring Creek Park, a cozy, tranquil place, buried in greenery. A true paradise amongst the city's infrastructure. However, only part of the park was available for walking. The rest was covered with thickets and swamps. Mr. Vetrano asked his daughter to stick to her usual route, to stay away from unfamiliar paths and people. Unfortunately, Karina ignored his advice. In search of solitude, she decided to go to a grassy, deserted place. Karina's thoughts were abruptly interrupted. She felt a sharp pain in the back of her head, and she fell down. This rash decision cost the young woman her life. A frightening uncertainty entered the Vetrano home. It had been 2 hours since they had said goodbye to their youngest daughter. She should have been home by now, or at least answering the calls of her parents, who were frantically trying to reach her. And she had promised to keep her cell phone to herself. The anxiety was growing. Her father sensed that something was wrong and decided to seek help from his neighbor, the chief of the New York City Police Department. They were on good terms, and the high-ranking official knew that Philip would not make a fuss over nothing. After that, Karina Vetrano was reported missing. Police began searching for the young woman, combing the park area and surrounding streets. As a result, experienced canine units were brought in. As it is known, the first 24 hours after the disappearance of a person are crucial and most informative.
Therefore, law enforcement utilized all available resources before nightfall. At the same time, Mr. Vetrano, along with a group of volunteers, searched for his daughter on his own. He scoured the park from end to end, combing the paths and wading through the tall grass, all the while making phone calls. As dusk fell, the man noticed a light in the grass. As he approached, he recognized Karina's phone. Maybe she lost her cell phone and just didn't let us know. Philip hoped. The patriarch of the family headed toward the police officers, deciding to pick his way through the thicket. Stepping into the grass, he came across something soft. A partially undressed female corpse lay face down. Philip turned it over and saw a familiar face. A desperate scream burst from his father's chest. It was Karina. She hadn't lost her phone like he thought. His little girl wasn't answering her phone because she had been robbed of her life. The realization of what had happened overwhelmed Mr. Vetrano. Hearing the screaming and yelling, the police rushed to him. They dragged Philippe away from his daughter's body, trying to explain that this was now a crime scene. Anything in the area was considered evidence. To prevent the evidence from being tampered with, the law enforcement officers asked the father of the deceased not to touch anything. On the way home, Mr. Vetrano thought a lot. He was tormented by how to tell his wife about their daughter's death. Images of the past flashed before his eyes. He remembered how on July 12, 1986, in Queens, their second daughter was born. Philip had been proud of her from an early age. She was obedient and well-mannered. He vividly remembered taking her to her first day of school, how well she did in her studies. Such education enabled her to earn a higher degree. Karina graduated from St. John's University with a master's degree in speech pathology. She had always dreamed of helping children and worked with autistic kids. His daughter was multifaceted. She loved to travel and write. She adored sports, especially running. Their shared passion brought them closer. She was his inspiration. The father remembered how jealously he treated her suitors. He so wanted her to be truly loved, hoping that she would eventually create a strong family like he and Kathy had, and give him wonderful grandchildren. The return journey turned into an eternity. At the entrance to the house, Mr. Vetrano paused, taking a deep breath. "I need to be strong to support my family. I have to pull myself together," the man commanded himself. His wife met him at the threshold. Fortunately, he didn't need to explain anything to her. She understood everything from her husband's face. Kathy cried, approached her husband, and hugged him. Soon, Karina's relatives and friends learned of the incident. They struggled to recover from the shock. Believing in the sudden death of the young woman was hard, let alone accepting its violent nature. Miss Vetrano had been subjected to a brutal attack. This was the conclusion reached by investigators. At first glance, it was obvious that the woman had resisted. Even in death, her fists remained clenched. Bruises and abrasions were found on her once young and healthy body, and her athletic clothing was torn. The autopsy showed that the back of the victim's skull had been damaged by a blunt object, probably a stone. However, the cause of death was asphyxiation. A clear mark was visible on the woman's neck. The forensic examination also revealed the intimate nature of the crime: violence. The experts' findings confirmed the police's initial suspicions. Earth and grass were found under the victim's fingernails, probably in an attempt to free herself from her attacker's grip and escape. Specialists examined her mouth and found her teeth knocked out and cracked in places. She had clearly bitten to defend herself. Even the woman's neck was covered with numerous scratches. She was grabbing with her hands, trying to force her attacker to let go of her. Karina did not want to die and fought hard for her life. Karina Vetrano's youngest daughter, Karina, had a variety of interests, but she especially loved writing. In 2013, she starred in a short movie by her friend and screenwriter Petros Georgiadis, which was based on a poem she had written. paradox. In her blogs, the girl often addressed complex issues, often touching on the topics of love and the end of life. Shortly after this tragedy, new information was leaked to the media. In Princeton, Massachusetts, the body of another jogger was found among the tall grass. The woman, apparently also out for a walk in a secluded place, suffered a similar fate. At first glance, the cases were identical. Could there be another serial offender in America? The case was taken up by geneticists, who were tasked with comparing DNA samples collected from the crime scenes. As luck would have it, unidentified samples were found on both victims. Contrary to police expectations, the analysis revealed no connection between the crimes. It turned out that the DNA samples belonged to different people. Particularly intriguing is the story surrounding the DNA material taken from under her fingernails, on her back, and from Karina Vetrano's phone. The DNA was found in small quantities, but was deemed sufficient for analysis by experts. For a long time, this DNA remained the only lead in the investigation, giving a chance to identify the perpetrator. It is known that most life-ending crimes are committed by someone close to the victim, so the police could not dismiss any possibility. For this purpose, the victim's father provided his DNA as he was the one who first discovered his daughter's body. However, the timing for this procedure was poorly chosen. It took place on the day of Karina's funeral. Later, all of the woman's relatives also underwent a DNA test, which did not give any matches. Detectives decided to interview Karina's relatives and friends, finding out if Mrs. Vetrano had any enemies or ill-wishers. It turned out that there were none. Everyone respected and loved her. Then the investigators developed a new version. The deed was committed from base motives. Someone met the beautiful Karina in a secluded place and attacked her, giving in to base motives. At a loss, the investigation sought the public's help by offering a $10,000 reward for information that could lead to the perpetrator. The initiative received a widespread response. Detectives explored some 250 leads, conducted 600 genetic tests, and compiled more than 1,700 reports, all to no avail. It seemed that the perpetrator had not committed crimes before, at least not been caught for them, which further complicated the investigation. On August 31st, 2016, a utility worker approached the police station with some information. At the time of Miss Vetrano's death, he was in a restricted area of the park and saw a man emerge from the bushes who then ran in a northerly direction. Based on his testimony, the New York Police Department developed and distributed a sketch of the suspect in December 2016. However, it took into account that the person depicted in the sketch could have been a passerby who was in the wrong place at the wrong time. Unfortunately, the release of the sketch of the suspected perpetrator provided no new information, and the investigation reached another long stalemate. On December 4th, 2016, the Federal Bureau of Investigation joined the investigation into the death of Karina Vetrano. Initially, they developed a psychological profile of the perpetrator. According to FBI experts, the individual was very familiar with the area, especially the park where the incident occurred, suggesting the possibility that the assailant lived or continues to live nearby. However, fearing capture, he now avoids the area. It was clear he understood that the quiet, partially overgrown territory was ideal for concealing his act. Based on this theory, the police conducted screenings among local African American men, but this did not yield the desired result. Chanel Lewis's life didn't particularly stand out from other young African American individuals. He lived in one of Brooklyn's low-income housing complexes, about 4-5 miles from Spring Creek Park. Unemployed, Chanel lived with his mother, 3 sisters, and their children. Perhaps the only detail that set him apart was his diagnosis of paranoid schizophrenia. Nonetheless, this didn't prevent him from graduating from a private school for students with emotional and behavioral issues. Former classmates remembered Chanel as a quiet loner. The kids constantly picked on him, one of them shared. Girls even intimidated and punched him. He had no friends. Another peer mentioned that Lewis sometimes fought back, but not effectively. He was often ridiculed for his clothing and appearance. Chanel always wore a hoodie and would smirk and walk away in difficult situations, earning him the nickname African Lizard. However, a fellow student, 17-year-old Danielle Nunes, described Chanel as a smart kid with good grades. "He'd like to show me funny videos on the bus," she recalled. "I never saw him be cruel." Some sources reported that the young man once claimed he wanted to cut all the girls, asking during his time in middle school, "What happens if I bring a knife to school?" Dr. Edward Dana, the executive director of the school to which Chanel was transferred, commented on this. "We received no reports of threats in middle school. During his time at our school, he had no disciplinary sanctions. I never heard him make threatening statements towards other students." Nonetheless, Chanel was a traumatized teenager who often experienced bullying. He dreamed of working in social services, wanting to help those in distress. When conflicts arose at home, he would wander the streets, frequently visiting the park. Lewis had several minor encounters with the police, 2 for violations in Spring Creek and 1 for urinating in public. In May 2016, another incident occurred when a local merchant reported Lewis for loitering in his store with a crowbar. Responding officers checked Chanel's ID and released him, as he had no prior incidents. However, this information was retained by the police and would later play a crucial role in the investigation into Karina Vetrano's death. In February 2017, Detective John Russo, who was involved in the investigation, remembered something significant. He had repeatedly seen a young man in a hoodie wandering the park. John even attempted to follow him once, intrigued by the individual's behavior. The young man walked slowly, stopping for long periods in front of houses near the park as if scouting them for potential burglaries. However, Russo lost sight of him when he contacted his colleagues by phone. The next day, following a store owner's report, a teenager matching the description came to the police's attention. 2 months into the investigation, John Russo recalled this wanderer, thinking he might have seen or heard something relevant. Investigators zeroed in on Chanel Lewis after Detective Russo took a closer look at the young man's file. Chanel's peculiarities raised interest. The police began to inquire about him among acquaintances and teachers, and information surfaced that he had allegedly expressed a desire to harm girls. This news stirred concern and suspicion. With no other leads, officers decided to focus on Lewis. It was later discovered that during the time of Karina's death, Chanel was not at home. After an argument with his family, he had gone to the park. Upon his return, his appearance was disheveled, with torn clothing and visible bruises and abrasions. His mother inquired about what had happened, and Lewis claimed he had been attacked. His account matched the timeline with a witness's description of a man fleeing the park. Additionally, on August 3, 2016, Lewis's father, a former school principal, took him to the hospital for treatment of severe wounds, most of which were cuts, and he also had an injured hand. The investigators reviewed the medical records from that day and found the story plausible. However, they saw it differently, noting similarities between the events involving Chanel Lewis and Karina Vetrano. On February 4, 2017, Chanel was brought to the police station and voluntarily provided his DMA for analysis. Would a perpetrator willingly do this? Detectives wondered. The interrogation began on the morning of February 5th. Lewis admitted that he was indeed in the park around 5 p.m. on August 2, 2016, but clarified he was walking on dirt paths, not through the thickets, and listening to music. He confessed to encountering a young woman jogging with her phone in her hand. When asked by detectives if something happened when he encountered her, Chanel nodded and quietly said, "Yes." Everyone was stunned. His response was vague, indicating confusion. "I was angry. One thing led to another. What happened, happened," he finally stated clearly. Investigators were skeptical of this semi-admission, fearing it might provoke doubt among jurors during a trial. They waited for Chanel to elaborate. "I was walking in the park, trying to distract myself from a family argument. Then I met a woman. She was alone. I decided to follow her. When she passed by me, I grabbed her shoulders, threw her to the ground, and hit her face about 5 times so she couldn't scream. My punches knocked out several of her teeth, injuring my hand, Chanel recalled. He also added that the struggle lasted about 5 minutes. Miss Vetrano fiercely resisted, scratching and biting. To avoid attracting attention, Lewis dragged her from the path into tall grass, where he attempted to undress and assault her. She was shocked, but continued to resist. Chanel then forcefully strangled her until he realized she was no longer alive. When asked if he knew the victim beforehand, he replied, "I did not know her before this. It all happened by chance." The motive for the act became even more unexpected and bizarre. It turns out, loud music played by a neighborhood gang member for hours on end triggered Chanel's hatred and uncontrollable aggression. These negative emotions were unleashed on the unfortunate woman, a strange reason for an act indeed.
Investigators' confusion was dispelled when DNA comparison results matched perfectly. Microscopic traces found on the victim's body and phone belonged to Chanel. Consequently, the police and the prosecutor concluded the case was solved and ready for court. However, the motive still seemed implausible. It's possible Chanel had noticed Karina before, as he often frequented the park and might have seen her with her father. He liked her and decided to approach her. But after being rejected, he became angry and struck her, and the situation spiraled out of control. This scenario would have been more understandable. On November 5, 2018, the trial against Chanel Lewis began. Despite his earlier statements to the authorities, Lewis pleaded not guilty, a stance echoed by his family, denying his involvement in the crime. The prosecution charged Lewis with ending a life and sexual assault, facing him with a sentence ranging from 25 years to life imprisonment. The debate over Lewis's guilt not only unfolded in the courtroom, but also spilled over into the media. Lewis's defense team stirred the pot, pointing out alleged legal violations during his arrest. Along with various news outlets, they claimed racial bias and discrimination. However, the judge dismissed these allegations as baseless, emphasizing that the investigation complied with legal standards. The prosecution presented tangible evidence and DNA analysis findings. The defense argued that the evidence was insufficient and contaminated, given the large number of people at the crime scene, including the victim's father, who discovered her body. Forensic biologist Linda Razzano stated the odds of the DNA belonging to someone other than Lewis were 1 in 6 trillion. The prosecutor also introduced Lewis's phone records, revealing his internet searches on second chances and forgiveness in Catholicism, prompting the question, what sin was Chanel hoping to atone for? The release of Lewis's confession video sparked further controversy, with his lawyers arguing he was under immense pressure, leading to a coerced confession. They suspected the police of fabricating evidence, claiming the recording began only after Lewis was pressured, and that the search of his home violated protocols. The defense suggested the investigation into Karina Vetrano's death was initially botched, with public pressure mounting for an arrest leading to Lewis becoming a scapegoat. The jury was struck by the defense's powerful arguments. After hearing both sides, they were unable to reach a conclusive verdict. On November 21, 2018, the judge declared a mistrial, with a retrial initially scheduled for January 22, 2019, but later postponed to March 2019. After 5 hours of deliberation, Chanel Lewis was ultimately found guilty of Karina Vetrano's death and sentenced to life without parole on July 23, 2019. The defense's delay tactics included citing an anonymous source to allege misconduct by a juror, suggesting jury pressure and a conspiracy, with some calling the trial a lynch mob. The case, seemingly straightforward at first, ignited widespread prejudices and fears in society. Karina Vetrano's death touched many, serving as a grim reminder for women to be cautious. Did justice prevail? In any case, a young woman's life was cut short, and Chanel Lewis was sentenced to life imprisonment. Both families lost their children. The hope remains that the truth was indeed uncovered. Otherwise, an innocent man is behind bars while the perpetrator remains free.
The Summer Baldwin case, buried in suitcases. In the world of criminal investigations, When two or more crimes share similar characteristics, experts often link them as part of a series. It can take years to identify and apprehend serial criminals. Most criminals have experienced violence and abuse as children, and some have varying degrees of mental illness. Nevertheless, they are aware of their actions. To the outside world, these people often seem perfectly normal, so much so that those around them don't notice that they are facing a ruthless killer. Such was the case with Rosendo Rodriguez, an outwardly unassuming young man who served in the U.S. Marine Corps. Witnesses who knew him personally and testified at his trial described him as a friendly, responsible, and good-hearted man who wouldn't hurt a fly. However, it emerged that he had brutally taken the lives of two young women and disposed of their bodies in a particularly extravagant and unusual way. Looking ahead, I will say that this man was justly punished for his heinous deeds. But let's start from the beginning to understand this loud and complex case, learn about his victims, and dive into the childhood of the criminal to understand how he turned into a monster, a naked beauty in a suitcase. This chilling tale began on September 13, 2005, in the outskirts of Lubbock, Texas. A city utility worker performing routine duties at a local landfill noticed an unusual object amid the typical array of colorful trash, a large black suitcase that seemed oddly intact and bulky. Curiosity piqued. He opened the suitcase, hoping perhaps to find something valuable. To his horror, the first thing he saw upon unzipping it was a woman's manicured hand. Initially, he couldn't believe it was a real human body and not a doll or mannequin. On fully opening the suitcase, he discovered the naked body of a young woman, her knees drawn up to her chest, arms crossed around her neck. The worker immediately halted the garbage truck that had brought the grisly suitcase and called the police. The landfill was quickly cordoned off, and the truck and its contents were thoroughly examined. Finding any clues in a vast city dump was nearly impossible, but the investigators hoped to at least uncover hints about the woman's identity and how she ended up there in such a state. No identification or personal items were found in the suitcase. The only distinctive feature on the body was a small tattoo on the leg with the word "Summer." The medical examiners now faced the task of determining the cause of death, while forensic experts needed to identify the victim and track down her killer. An autopsy revealed multiple injuries inflicted while the woman was alive, including signs of sexual violence. However, the cause of death was positional asphyxiation. She was still alive when placed in the suitcase, but suffocated due to the confined space. By the time her body was found, she had been deceased for approximately a day. Fingerprint analysis uploaded to the national database in the United States identified the victim as 29-year-old Summer Lee Baldwin. Who was Summer Baldwin? Summer Baldwin, born in 1976 in Washington, was known for her sweet, kind, and open nature. She was a bright student with a vibrant personality and many friends. Dreaming of an acting career, Summer had high aspirations for her life. After graduating from high school, she enrolled in community college, but university studies were difficult for her. Friends invited her to Texas for a change of scenery and opportunities. Summer moved to Lubbock with the support of her parents, hoping to start her life with a clean slate. It is unknown when Summer's life spiraled, but she gradually became addicted to alcohol and illicit drugs without seeking help from her family. Over time, her addiction worsened, leading to job loss and connections with people with criminal records. Her acting dreams were dashed, and she eventually began working as an escort to support herself. Unaware of their daughter's problems, Summer's parents thought she was leading a successful life. They were devastated when the police informed them of her tragic death in September 2005.
The information they provided about Summer's friends and hangouts was limited. Notably, a few months before her death, Summer was a key witness in an important federal counterfeiting case. This suggested that her murder may have been a contract killing by a criminal gang, which drew the attention of the FBI and put the investigation under special scrutiny. The investigation and the first suspects. The first person called in for questioning by the police was Rebecca, best friend of the deceased Summer Baldwin. Rebecca shed light on Summer's occupation and mentioned several of her boyfriends, one of whom behaved aggressively, often raised his hand to her and persistently stalked her after their breakup. That man became the first suspect in the case. Summer's ex-boyfriend was detained and brought to the station the same day, but he categorically denied his involvement in the case. Moreover, he seemed genuinely surprised and upset by the news of her death. He had a solid alibi. The night before the tragedy, he had been involved in a drunken brawl in a bar and spent the night in a cell with another troublemaker. As a result, the police had to release the first and only suspect at the time. Another friend and, so to speak, colleague of the deceased provided the investigation with much more important information. According to a woman named Marjorie, she saw Sammer the evening before the murder, and they even exchanged a few words. They met on September 11th in the parking lot of a convenience store. Marjorie recounted that a red van pulled up to the store, from which a young, fit man of Latino appearance got out and went inside, presumably to shop. In the meantime, Summer, seeing her friend, came out from the passenger side to greet her. She told Marjorie that he was her client, with whom she had been meeting for the second time in recent days. After the man came out of the store, he got behind the wheel, and Summer hurried back into the van. Marjorie then went about her business and didn't see which direction the van drove off, nor did she know where the couple planned to have their rendezvous. She added that she had never seen the man before and assumed he was not a local. The only description she could provide was that he had very short hair, like a military man, due to the darkness outside and her inability to see him clearly. What's wrong with the suitcase? The suitcase, which became a young woman's coffin, appeared quite odd. Externally, it was smeared with garbage and waste, yet it wasn't worn out, and its wheels looked new. Inside, all tags were in perfect condition, and the lining seemed as if the item was brand new. Moreover, even the plastic attachment for the price tag was intact, suggesting that the person who bought the suitcase hadn't removed it. It was established that suitcases of this brand were sold in dozens of stores throughout the city, but this particular large model was available only in 2 stores. Thanks to the perfectly preserved barcode, it was discovered that a pair of identical suitcases were sold the day before the grim discovery at a Walmart store in the same area of the city where the girl was last seen alive. The first purchase was made after noon, and the second around 2 in the morning, which was quite strange and suspicious. Police officers immediately went there and requested the store's surveillance camera footage. Upon reviewing the material, they found that the first suitcase was bought by an elderly couple. These people were not initially suspicious, but they were located, and they could present the suitcase and explained that they bought it for a vacation trip. The second suitcase, however, was bought by a young man of Latino appearance, athletic build, and with very short hair, like a military man's. Suspicions arose that this was the person mentioned by the witness who saw him in the company of the deceased girl in the parking lot of the supermarket. Moreover, the man also bought a pair of disposable gloves at the checkout. Further information was provided by the external surveillance cameras installed in the store's parking lot. They showed the man exiting with the suitcase in hand and loading it into a red van. Too many coincidences led the police to believe they had found their man, and all that remained was to establish his identity, locate, and bring him in for questioning. Hunt for the stranger. The man was extremely cautious, using cash instead of a card to avoid leaving any personal data. However, he didn't account for the surveillance cameras in the parking lot, which captured his vehicle's license plate number perfectly. Police quickly identified the vehicle as a rental in the name of Rosendo Rodriguez, a U.S. Marine Corps reservist. Rodriguez had no criminal record and hadn't previously come to police attention. He was in Lubbock for a few days with his unit for training. Finding Rodriguez immediately was challenging as he wasn't at the hotel where his unit stayed. However, police had his details and discovered he had withdrawn a large sum of cash from an ATM at another hotel, likely the money used to pay for the suitcase and gloves. Rodriguez hadn't stayed at the hotel where he used the ATM. Instead, someone named Thomas Rodriguez, matching Rosendo's description, had checked in on September 11th. It turned out to be the same person using a different name for unknown reasons. Luck favored the investigation. The hotel room rented by Rodriguez, which he had already checked out of, hadn't been cleaned yet, yielding crucial evidence. There were brown stains and splatters on the carpet, bed, and walls that resembled dried blood. A tag from a new suitcase was found near the bed, and the trash contained used contraceptives and disposable gloves. Forensic analysis confirmed the dried blood in the room belonged to Summer, and DNA on the contraceptives and gloves matched both Summer and Rodriguez. There was no doubt they had found the murderer, but by then, Rodriguez had already left the city. However, with all necessary information, tracking him down was straightforward. Rosendo Rodriguez III was born on March 26, 1980, in Wichita Falls, Texas, into a poor family of Mexican immigrants. Reports suggest that he experienced violence and harsh treatment in his early childhood. His father, described as domineering and aggressive, struggled with alcoholism and frequently abused his wife and children. During his childhood, Rosendo also displayed aggression, often getting into fights at school. However, as he grew older, he learned to control his anger. After high school, he attended Texas Tech University and moved away from his parents. Living independently, he worked various jobs, including at a pizzeria, as a courier, and as an office clerk, before deciding to serve in the U.S. Marine Corps. Colleagues in the military described Rodriguez as quiet, balanced, disciplined, and responsible. He was seen as a good friend, always ready to help, well-educated, and physically attractive, making him popular with women. Rodriguez was arrested on September 15th at his home in San Antonio. When police arrived, he was calm and seemingly unaware of the gravity of the situation. During the search, a striped shirt and shorts were found, matching the outfit he wore when purchasing the suitcase caught on surveillance footage. Additionally, his laptop and mobile phone were seized, interrogations, and Rodriguez's version. For the first few weeks, Rosendo remained silent and denied involvement in Summer Baldwin's murder. However, the evidence against him was overwhelming, so following his attorney's advice, he started giving statements with his version of events, which differed significantly from the scenario built by the forensic experts. Rodriguez began by explaining that he had accidentally booked a hotel separate from his fellow servicemen. He knew only the name of the hotel chain they were supposed to stay at, chose a hotel randomly, and only after checking in did he realize the rest were at a different location. He chose not to relocate as the military leadership indicated it wasn't necessary. He failed to explain why he registered under a different name. On the morning of September 10th, Rodriguez rented a van for convenience around the city. That evening, he claimed to have met Summer Baldwin by chance. According to him, he saw a blonde woman sitting on a bench by the road, covering her face with her hands as if she was crying. Intrigued and concerned, he stopped to check if she was okay and needed help. They struck up a conversation. She calmed down, and then they went to his hotel room where they talked and drank a bit, but did not become intimate. The next morning, Rosendo drove her home, but they agreed to meet in the evening. He picked her up at the same place around 9 p.m. and went to a supermarket, where Summer saw her friend Marjorie. They then returned to the hotel, where Rodriguez said there was consensual intimacy between them. Afterward, however, Rodriguez said Summer became aggressive and demanded money, which surprised him because he did not realize he was with a call girl. When he refused, she allegedly pulled a knife out of her purse and began threatening him. He disarmed her and punched her in the face, causing her nose to bleed. Rodriguez claims he did not intend to harm her, but acted in self-defense. Moments later, Summer collapsed on the bed and convulsed, foaming at the mouth. He stated that he tried to help her, but refrained from mouth-to-mouth resuscitation because of the blood and foam on her face. After a minute, she stopped breathing. Realizing she was dead, he panicked. He went to the nearest store, bought a suitcase and gloves, returned to the hotel, put her body in the suitcase, and threw it in the dumpster, knowing that it would be taken to the landfill the next morning. He then checked out of the hotel, returned the rental car, and drove home to San Antonio as if nothing had happened. Inconsistencies in the suspect's story. Investigators immediately realized that Rosendo Rodriguez was lying because there were numerous inconsistencies in his story. For example, Marjorie, who met Summer in the parking lot the night of the crime, claimed that Summer told her explicitly that the man was a client of hers with whom they had previously had a paid meeting. Rodriguez claims that everything between them was consensual, but evidence on Summer's body indicates that she was taken advantage of. It is likely that their first night was indeed consensual, which is why Summer agreed to meet him again. Moreover, Rodriguez claimed that he only hit Summer in the face once to calm her down, but she died of a seizure. However, an autopsy found about 30 fresh bruises on Baldwin's head and body on the night of the crime, and several stab wounds. In addition, she was alive when he packed her in the suitcase, contradicting his claim that she was already dead. Another girl in a suitcase. During an investigation at Rodriguez's residence, police seized his laptop computer. A review of his search history revealed a disturbing pattern. In the 3 days prior to his arrest, Rodriguez had been actively searching for information about a girl named Summer, paying attention to whether there was an ongoing search for her and whether her body had been found in a landfill. Interestingly, Rodriguez also frequently searched for Joanna Catherine Rogers, a 16-year-old girl from Lubbock who went missing a year and a half ago. When authorities offered Rodriguez a plea bargain in exchange for information about Joanna's fate, a deal that included a reduced sentence and avoided the death penalty, he reluctantly accepted and told his story. He met Joanna, a high school student in Lubbock, in late April 2004. After a few meetings, they went to his hotel room on May 4th. The situation turned tragic when, after an argument over money and threats of a lawsuit for rape, Rodriguez panicked and covered Joanna's mouth to silence her and inadvertently caused her death. In a desperate attempt to dispose of the body, Rodriguez put it in his own suitcase and threw it in a dumpster. This method replicates the disposal of Summer's body a year and a half later. Rodriguez initially confessed to these actions, but later recanted his testimony, claiming coercion. Realizing the need to find Joanna's body to strengthen the case, police undertook a massive search of the city dump. More than a year later, they miraculously found a suitcase containing Joanna's remains. Despite severe decomposition, DNA testing confirmed the identity of the remains. This evidence allowed authorities to charge Rodriguez as a serial offender, committing similar heinous crimes with a consistent modus operandi. Trial, verdict, and execution. Despite the overwhelming evidence and the gravity of his crimes, defendant Rosendo Rodriguez hoped to avoid the death penalty until the last moment, expecting a life sentence with the possibility of parole. However, the court decided otherwise.
The decisive factor was the fact that Summer Baldwin was 3 months pregnant at the time of her tragic death. This aggravating factor was decisive, and the court found Rodriguez guilty of first-degree murder, sentencing him to death by lethal injection. Rodriguez and his lawyers filed multiple appeals, citing errors and misconduct by investigators, but all were rejected. While in prison awaiting execution, Rodriguez even maintained his own blog on criminal justice and policy issues. On March 27, 2018, nearly 10 years after being convicted of his heinous crimes, Rosendo Rodriguez was finally executed. This occurred the day after his 38th birthday. The death sentence was carried out in the Huntsville prison in Texas. This execution was the 4th in Texas and the 7th in the United States for the year 2018.